Harry Coningsby was the charge of his grandfather, Lord Monmouth, after his parents died. Coningsby first met his grandfather, who was often out of the country on government business, when he was aged about 9 and was so overwhelmed, he could only cry. Coningsby was brought up in his grandfather's political entourage, including the critical and self-righteous, but often wrong, Mr. Rigby and the two political hacks, Tadpole and Taper. Coningsby went to Eton where, in a rafting incident, he saved the life of a son of a wealthy manufacturer, Oswald Millbank. Out walking one day shortly after leaving Eton, Coningsby takes refuge from a storm in an inn where he is captivated by a flamboyant traveller talking about young people needing to drive things forward and of the end of the age of ruins. Coningsby is now well integrated into upper-class sets where he befriends a number of like-minded young gentlemen who look up to him as their leader. On a trip to Manchester, Coningsby decides to visit Millbank, who is abroad, and so he is entertained by Millbank's father and his shy but beautiful 16-year-old sister Edith. With Lord Monmouth's return to England, Coningsby is invited to the family seat for the first time for a massive reception, including a play which features the stage debut of Flora La Petite, the daughter of a great deceased actress and whom Lord Monmouth has taken under his wing. Flora does well but breaks down in tears, and Coningsby alone goes backstage to sympathize. Guests are also dazzled by the arrival of the man Coningsby met in the inn, Sidonia, an ardent Jewish nationalist, who also impresses Princess Lucretia, who was being lined up by her stepmother, Madame Colonna, as a potential wife for Coningsby. Shortly afterwards, the owner of Lord Monmouth's adjoining estate dies with no heirs, but Lord Monmouth's bid to buy his land, Hellingsley, is thwarted by Millbank Sr. Their rivalry is accentuated when Monmouth's Tory candidate for the local parliamentary seat, Rigby, is defeated by the Liberal candidate, Millbank SNR. In disgust, Monmouth resolves to leave the country but announces his surprise marriage to Lucretia. Meanwhile, Flora is becoming more withdrawn and is unable to sing so frequently. After his first year at university, Coningsby goes to Paris to meet his grandfather. He is shown some of his father's old possessions in a banker's safe, including a portrait of a woman, presumably Coningsby's mother, which he had also seen at Millbank's home. Whilst visiting an art gallery, he observes a beautiful young woman who turns out to be Edith Millbank, and they are reacquainted at a grand ball Lord Monmouth holds the following evening. Shortly afterwards, Coningsby hears that Sidonia is to marry Edith and abruptly leaves Paris. A year later, Coningsby encounters Edith's aunt and learns that the rumor about Edith and Sidonia's marriage was false. Edith is now staying at Hellingsley, so Coningsby returns to his grandfather's estate, visits Edith, and they both declare their love to each other. However, the next day, Edith's father bans Coningsby from seeing her again since their families cannot be linked. During the conversation, the mystery of the portrait is resolved as it emerges that Millbank was in love with Coningsby's mother, but Coningsby's father poached her from him. A year later, Coningsby and Edith exchange glances and a few words at a ball. Edith is on the arm of a potential suitor, Lord Beaumanoir, and Coningsby is thought to be about to wed Lady Teresa. Coningsby is summoned by Lord Monmouth, who is now estranged from Lucretia, in part because he is now aware of her affection for Sidonia. Monmouth has intelligence that an election is imminent and wants Coningsby to be the Tory candidate, but Coningsby refuses because he cannot support the Conservatives since he does not know what they want to conserve and anyway is an opponent of the status quo. Monmouth then summons Rigby, whom Lucretia intercepts. They hatch a plot to discredit Coningsby in the eyes of Lord Monmouth by telling him about his love for Edith. The plan backfires, with Monmouth ordering Lucretia to leave his house, although he does leave Rigby in charge whilst he goes travelling. Through various meetings, Coningsby learns that Edith is not engaged to Lord Beaumanoir, and she learns he is not engaged to Lady Teresa, when her wedding to a friend of Coningsby is announced. Edith and Coningsby resolve to get back together. On hearing about Lucretia's eviction, Coningsby goes to visit his grandfather who refuses to see him, a decision he later regrets and resolves to amend. At a Christmas party shortly afterwards hosted by one of Coningsby's school friends, news arrives that Lord Monmouth has died. Monmouth had a habit of changing his will, and the latest version bequeaths next to nothing to Coningsby, the bulk of his wealth being left to Flora, who turns out to be his daughter. Flora, her health failing, offers to give it all to Coningsby on account of his kindness to her, but he refuses. With no income or wealth, Coningsby takes up law studies with the aim of eventually becoming Lord Chancellor. He realizes that he now has nothing to offer Edith and abandons hope of being with her. Meanwhile, her father finds out that he was cut from Monmouth's will on account of his love for Edith, and so at the forthcoming election he stands down as a candidate in favor of Coningsby, who, without being aware of his candidacy, handsomely defeats Rigby at the ensuing election. Coningsby returns triumphantly to his constituency, and Millbank Sr. grants permission for him to marry Edith. Flora dies, leaving her wealth to Coningsby. The novel ends with a series of questions asking whether or not Coningsby will be true to his principles and beliefs in his parliamentary career.